world history students. This is Mr. Everton, and this is a video about Spanish Empire and the way that it changed Latin America. So when we talk about Latin America, we're talking about anything basically below modern United States. So Mexico, the Caribbean, and South America all are included in the umbrella term Latin America. And we're going to be looking at the Spanish influences on economics and culture. And as part of culture, we're also going to talk about a social hierarchy. So it's kind of economics, culture, and social systems, all in the early modern period, which remember is 1450 to 1750, but this kind of ends around 1700. So, all right, let's get started. I want to start off by talking to you about economics. And to understand colonial empires in the early modern period, you need to know this word mercantilism. Mercantilism is an economic belief, an economic philosophy or system. And the main thing to know about it is that these Europeans who believed in mercantilism, they thought of wealth as being limited, right? Like a pie. And I'm stealing all of this from Heimler, but it was good, so I'm stealing it. If all the wealth in the world is a pie, right? There's a limited amount of pie. At some point, all the pie is going to get eaten. It's going to be gone. So the whole goal for people who follow mercantilism is to make sure that they get as much pie as possible. Because if somebody else gets the pie, then they won't have it. So just replace pie with money. That's mercantilism. So they believe that wealth is measured in gold and silver. So like the more of those precious metals you have access to, the better off you're going to be. And they believe in having a favorable balance of trade because, you know, if you're buying things from someone else, if you're buying things from another country, then you're going to be sending silver out of your country to pay for those things, right? Like if you're buying Chinese silk, your silver is going to go to China and they're going to get it, and then you'll have less pie. So you want to be selling things, not buying things, in a favorable balance of trade. And then finally, mercantilists believe in creating colonies in order to serve the mother country. And so, you know, Spain conquers the Americas, and then they start establishing colonies there, and they use those colonies in order to enrich Spain. You know, they don't care about helping the colony, right? They're not trying to develop the colony and make the colony successful. They're trying to extract value from the colony and bring it back to Spain and use that to make Spain wealthier. So that's mercantilism. And so an example of mercantilism, and here we're going to start talking about labor systems, which is, you know, labor work. Who does the work? Before Spain, the Incas had an empire in what is modern day Peru on the west coast of South America. And they had this system called the Mita system. And so as like part of your taxes as like an Incan citizen is that you would contribute your labor to help with projects that the empire needed, like building a road or like creating like a terraced agriculture, like a farm on the side of a mountain, or like making a bridge. And those are all things that you would do. You would contribute your labor to society to make things better. Maybe build a temple, right? So the Spanish come in, and Pizarro kills the Incan emperor, and the Spanish take over everything. And they take that system and they put it, they're like, oh, cool, we can use this. They use that labor system, except instead of having the indigenous Americans do things that like benefit Latin America, they have them mine silver. During this time period in what is modern day Bolivia, the Spanish discovered a literal mountain of silver, the largest deposit of silver in the world at that time, at a city called Potosi, or Potosi. I think I usually say Potosi, but I think you're supposed to say Potosi. Anyhow, they find this mountain of silver, and they're like, okay, well, we need to mine this silver, but there were no Spanish people who were willing to do it because the work was incredibly dangerous. Anytime you're mining things, you're going to be like breathing in dust from the ore that you're mining. It's really bad for your respiratory system. But they got to get the silver out, right? So they make the indigenous Americans do it, the Incas. And so, you know, they start sending these people down there, you know, 23 weeks a year, 1,800 feet underground, doing this incredibly dangerous work, lifting these heavy crowbars, breathing in all this silver dust. Lots of people get sick and die. The mortality rate working in these mines, in this mine, is terrible. Then they also discover some mercury in another mountain nearby, and mercury is really helpful for processing the silver and turning the silver into something that you can turn into coins. And so they start sending indigenous peoples down to get the mercury, and mercury is a neurotoxin that will also kill you. So all these indigenous peoples are being forced to do this work. It gets so bad that like mothers of Incan children like start maiming their kids, like cutting off their hands or their feet or something, so that their children won't have to go work in the mines. Like people who are being sent to work in the mines are having like funeral services for them while they're still alive before they go, because it's basically like a death sentence. If you go to work in Potosi, you're going to be dead. And all of that silver is being extracted and sent back to Spain. And then through this sort of like global network, the silver is circulating around the world and ending up in China. And you have a textbook reading on this as part of this assignment that's on the website that where you access to this video that's going to get more to that. It's going to ask you, how did the global silver trade affect different places? And so I think Latin America will be pretty obvious. Then it'll ask you about Spain and Japan and also China. So make sure that you answer those questions. Another example of labor systems that were set up in the Americas, one was the encomienda system. The encomienda system is very similar to feudalism in that the Spanish crown divided up its territory among what they called viceroys. And then the viceroys would give plots of land to, Spanish nobles who would be responsible for making that land, financially successful. And they would get to use all the people who lived there, sort of like serfs. So these peasants, these indigenous Americans who lived on the plot of land, which is called an encomienda, would have to give their labor to the Spanish noble who was running that encomienda. And in exchange for that, the way the Spanish saw this was, like, you're doing all this work as an indigenous American, and in exchange, we're going to teach you about Christianity so that when you die, you won't go to hell and your immortal soul will be saved. And so the Spanish were like, oh, well, it's like a fair trade. Like, they're growing crops for us and we're teaching them about Jesus and everything's cool. But eventually the Spanish recognized that system wasn't great, so they tried to reform it and tried to like take out the sort of enforced labor aspect of it. And this was sort of led to a new system called the hacienda system. And the hacienda is basically just a large plantation. Hacienda just means plantation, but in Latin America, where you have workers who are paid very little, but who are paid a wage in order to do work on the Spanish plantations. All right, so we're going to switch gears now and talk about culture. And one aspect of culture, this is sort of like on the borderline between social and cultural, but we'll just call it cultural for today. The Spanish created in Latin America created a hierarchy, a social hierarchy based on race. And so this is syncretism. Syncretism is combining two or more cultures. So here we're combining Spanish culture with indigenous American culture, and then also with the culture of enslaved people from Africa. And it's creating this new social hierarchy where you have, like, the whiter you are, the higher you are on the hierarchy. So if you are a Spanish person who's born in Spain, then you're called a peninsulare, and that comes from the word peninsula, like the Iberian Peninsula where Spain is located. So if you're born in Spain and you're white, then you're at the top. And then if you're born in Spain, if you're not born in Spain, if you're white, but you're born in America, then you're a Creole. And then that's like second best. And then they get into all these different mixings of different people who are not white, who are some sort of like, biracial, person. So like either they have a one white parent and one indigenous parent, and that's a mestizo. Or they have one white parent and one African parent, and that's a mulatto, which is an offensive term, but that is the name that was used as part of the system. And then below all this, the biracial folks in the middle, we have Native Americans and then enslaved people. So the assignment that I have for this part of it is there's a website about the casta system where the Spanish they were so obsessed with like categorizing race. They had all of these paintings that they made called casta paintings, which show you all the different possible combinations of parents and the kinds of kids they would have and what the kid would be called based on their racial identity. which is pretty gross. And then finally, another example of cultural syncretism is how did Christianity change when it came to the Americas? The Spanish were Catholics, and when they came to Latin America, they brought their Catholicism and started converting indigenous Americans to Catholicism. And aspects of traditional Inca and Aztec religious beliefs are going to merge with Catholicism and create a new syncretic faith. So you have a primary source document about this, the Latin American Virgin of Guadalupe, or Lady of Guadalupe, who's kind of this interesting figure who's like basically the Virgin Mary, but like altered slightly to make her reflecting the influences of Mexica and Incan religious beliefs. So read that primary source and take and answer the questions on your paper. And then you're going to have a reflection question to answer on Canvas. Will it be a thesis statement? Only time